lot of folks feel, I'm not crazy, you're crazy. And it takes a while to fight through and recover before you even have a concept of how bad it was.
All these little different things made me realize that the triggers basically went back to the original assaults, and I just didn't realize it.
When I used to talk about some things, I'd shake. I'd just kind of tremble a little bit. I'd get angry. I'd yell, I'd cry.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, is a mental health condition that can develop after a traumatic event, whether combat or non-combat related. These events can include, but are not limited to, experiencing or witnessing violence, sexual assault, a natural disaster, or a life-threatening accident. PTSD can bring flashbacks, nightmares, or a constant feeling of being on high alert. And it can make everyday life feel like a struggle.
People don't notice the power of their thoughts. And so working on those thoughts in a really prescribed manner, first working on just identifying them, possibly challenging them, looking at the evidence for and against thoughts can be a really powerful experience for a lot of veterans.
Since 1989, the Department of Veterans Affairs National Center for PTSD has been the world's leading resource for understanding and treating this condition. It's not a clinic, it's a center of excellence driving groundbreaking research, training clinicians, developing tools, and ensuring that veterans everywhere have access to proven treatments that work.
People do recover when they are treated. We've shown it's possible to recover.
This is Empathy Affect, the Force Marsh Media podcast that explores the human side of government. I'm Melissa Szynski, and today we're joined by the person you just heard, Dr. Paula Schnurr, Executive Director of the National Center for PTSD. Dr. Schnurr has been part of the center's mission since its earliest days, helping transform PTSD from something once doubted and stigmatized into a condition we now know can be treated and even overcome. In our conversation with her today, we'll explore the science behind new therapies, how research becomes real-world care in the VA system, the innovations shaping the future of PTSD treatment, and the stories of veterans whose lives have been changed by it. Dr. Schnurr, welcome to the show. I'm really excited to learn more about your research at the National Center for PTSD and work supporting veterans. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So I think it would be really great by just introducing the center for our guests. So can you start by breaking down what the National Center for PTSD is?
Sure. The National Center for PTSD is a center of excellence in research, education, and consultation in the Office of Mental Health in the Veterans Health Administration. We've been around since 1989, and we are proud to serve veterans and anyone interested in trauma and PTSD.
Excellent. You've dedicated so much of your career to studying and treating PTSD. I believe you've been with the center basically since its inception. So what inspired your focus on this work, particularly in the context of our country's veterans?
Thank you for that question. It happened when I was in my postdoctoral training at Dartmouth Medical School. I was approached by two faculty members, one of whom was at the VA, Matt Friedman, and another, Stan Rosenberg, who was in the psychiatry department where I was working, to do a study to follow up Dartmouth college graduates of the class of 67 and 68. And what was interesting is at that time, Dartmouth had a very big ROTC program, so there was a strong military training presence on campus. But Dartmouth was also a place where there were students opposed to the war, and it was a very interesting environment to look at the impact of the war and serving in the military and going into combat on the changes that people experienced from college to midlife. And so I helped write the grant. We got the grant, we published the work, and I was hooked.
And so began Dr. Schnurr's decades-long career in studying PTSD. Just to break it down clearly, PTSD can develop after a traumatic, life-threatening event. The symptoms could come with flashbacks, nightmares, avoiding reminders of the trauma, changes in mood, and constantly being on edge. While about 6% of the general population will experience PTSD at some point, rates among veterans are 7% and are as high as 30% for those who have seen combat. While the broad consensus is that PTSD looks comparable in people around the world, regardless of the type of trauma they've had, veterans can be at a higher risk of unique exposures, like traumatic brain injury or toxic chemicals, that may create additional complications for a person who has PTSD. Now that we know a little more about veterans who have PTSD, let's get into how new research discoveries at the National Center translate into actual treatment options and protocols across the VA care system.
So I think I'll give an example of something that happened with my own work, and it happened some years ago, but it very much reflects what VA can do, which is we can do the research and then we can translate the research into practice. So in 2007, my colleagues and I published a paper on a treatment known as prolonged exposure. It's one of the most effective treatments that we have for PTSD. It's widely available in VA now, but at the time we did the study, people were uncertain as to whether it would really work for veterans. It was developed initially for women who had been sexually traumatized. And so the question was, would it work in the VA? Would it be effective for veterans? We actually treated women, many of whom had been sexually traumatized either before or during or after the military, but who also, some of whom served in combat and had other kinds of exposures. And the study was unique because it was the first large-scale VA study to treat PTSD in an entirely female cohort, and was actually the first study of PTSD treatment for female veterans anywhere. So we finished the study, published it in 2007. And, for many academics, you publish a paper and you present it at meetings and you get recognition for that work. And then it may sit, it may not go anywhere, even if it does have implications for practice. But what VA did as a result of this is create a national training initiative in prolonged exposure because it was effective. And it was more effective than a very rigorous comparison treatment. So it suggested women who had served in the military and were in VA, and then by extension, men would also benefit from this treatment. So VA initiated a national training program for VA clinicians to make this widely available across the VA. And now it's available across the system. So it's a wonderful example of being able to do the science and then have it implemented, especially in a national healthcare system.
While the National Center doesn't run its own clinics, it works hand in hand with VA facilities and community providers to ensure veterans get access to proven treatments that work. That includes supporting more than 140 specialized PTSD programs across the VA, as well as helping clinicians inside and outside the system deliver evidence-based care. But the center's work doesn't stop at making today's best treatments more widely available. It's also delivering the search for tomorrow's breakthroughs, innovations that can reach more veterans and address the needs that current therapies may not fully meet. For Dr. Schnurr, innovations in overcoming these barriers are some of the most exciting parts of her work.
Innovation is really important, and there's a lot of interest, not just in the center, but across the field right now, because the fact is that we have effective treatments for PTSD. They really work. They work as well as the treatments that we have for depression and other mental disorders, but they don't work well enough for enough people. And so I think we have a mandate to enhance the outcomes of the treatments we have. We're working to develop new treatments as well, but treatments like prolonged exposure, cognitive processing therapy, medications, and the like are not benefiting enough people. And so some of our work is really targeted at enhancing treatment outcome. So let me give you an example. We have one treatment called trauma-informed guilt reduction, TRIGGER. It targets shame and guilt that are related to traumatic experiences. Not everyone has these kind of feelings, but many people do. And these symptoms may not fully resolve with a standard treatment. We've developed to specifically target these symptoms, which can be really troubling and really affect a person's functioning and well-being. And what we have found is that, in fact, this is a highly effective way to address these symptoms, which also relate to moral injury in veterans. And so it's a novel treatment that can go after something that may not otherwise be fully addressed by a standard treatment. Another thing I want to mention is that we've done research on ketamine, which is approved for use for treatment-resistant depression, but there's some reason to think that it may be effective for PTSD. We've done research on ketamine as a treatment itself, but also exploiting the neurobiological effects of ketamine to see if we can boost prolonged exposure, because there are reasons to think that it might help with the kind of new learning you do in prolonged exposure. So I hope that gives you and your listeners an example of everything from psychotherapy intervention to a combined intervention of medication with psychotherapy.
Those are some great examples of research paving the way forward. And speaking of innovation, though, artificial intelligence is one of the biggest innovations right now. So does AI play a role in how you see the projection of PTSD research and treatment going forward in the future?
So AI is playing an increasing role in our research, and not just in the National Center, but in the field writ large. And we're also even using AI to help us in some of our educational tools. So let me give you a couple examples. In terms of the research, we're using AI to help us develop prediction models as to like who might develop PTSD. It's a really important question, and it's something that we've been working on for the 40 years that I've been in the field. We only get so far, but AI can take us much further in terms of more sophisticated analytic strategies to predict who is at risk, because the idea being that if we can predict that you're at risk, we can provide preventive treatments to ultimately save you from developing PTSD. So that's an example of the use in research. But we also have to train people in doing the best kind of clinical interviewing for PTSD. We have an avatar-based training module online. So you can interact with a virtual patient. Let's say you're a provider and you interact with a virtual patient and a coach that teaches you how to do the PTSD interview and gives you feedback along the way. I mean, it could say something like, you really blew it almost to in that question. Usually I'm joking about that, but you can have real-time correction so that you can practice or make corrections as you're doing the interview. And we're using AI to help make this patient as realistic as possible and make the interactions between the learner and the program as realistic as possible. And so there's examples from product development all the way to research where we're using AI.
Before, you were mentioning that we have a lot of treatment options, or we know the evidence is there, but it's not enough. What is like the biggest challenge for really getting over the hurdle to making sure that treatment is like really effective? Is it medication? Is it psychotherapy? Is it just the way that PTSD manifests in different people?
That's a big question, and probably best addressed by a panel of experts in various aspects of the question. I think that what we need now is to find ways to identify the optimal treatment for an individual and help them fully benefit. And so maybe we're going to find a silver bullet. Maybe we're going to find a new drug or a new psychotherapy that just is a game changer. I'm not putting my money on that, because I think we've got really good treatments that just need to be enhanced. And we have precedent in science. I mean, if you think about what we've done in terms of HIV treatment over the years, what was a death sentence is now something that people live with because of iteration and continuing to improve. And so I think what we're trying to do in the case of PTSD, again, is identify the optimal treatment for an individual and then optimally engage them in treatment. If it's simple things like doing the homework that's necessary in most of the therapies, that we want to do things to promote that. Maybe it's family involvement, maybe it's making it convenient.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing we've been doing, and we can't take credit for this because it evolved outside of VA and then VA has been implementing it, is changing the schedule of therapy to help people get a full dose. It's hard to go to psychotherapy if you have to go every week. Maybe you take time off from work, you have to drive to the clinic, maybe you can have telehealth, but nonetheless, it can take 12, 14, 15 weeks to get through a course of therapy. But what if you could do it in 2 weeks? What if you could just go every day for 2 weeks? What we're finding with this approach is that there's much less dropout. People complete because it's much easier to do. And that is enabling them to maximally get engaged with the therapy, to get their homework done and get the benefit that they might not otherwise get if they get through about 6 or 7 sessions and walk out the door.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of meeting people where they're at. I know that treatment is like, it's not always linear for people. You got to figure out a way that works. So it's not an easy answer like you were saying, but I appreciate your thoughts behind it.
Is meeting people where they're at. And it's important because not every treatment is optimal for every person. And so if someone has tried treatment, it's really important to not throw in the towel and to try another treatment, because sometimes it's the second treatment, maybe it's even the third treatment that you try. I think we accept this with medication more so, especially in the case of depression, where we even see ads on the television. Your antidepressant didn't work. Well, take this extra medication to help you. We recognize it there, but PTSD is a mental disorder like depression, like anxiety, and it's possible that people will need to try additional strategies before they find one that really works for them.
Very true. Just out of curiosity, how many veterans are currently engaged in PTSD treatment within the VA system? And what do you think those numbers say about how effective VA-supported therapies are in treating PTSD among veterans?
So in fiscal year 24, which ended in September 24, we treated 770,000 veterans for PTSD. Wow. So I'm here as a scientist, so I can comment on the evidence behind the treatment, okay? And the fact that I think we have veterans engaged in care is a good thing, because we offer a range of therapies for the veteran community. The treatments that we offer are effective. I've said this before, and we're continuing to innovate and identify new strategies to supplement them, to combine with them, or even to replace existing treatments as we learn more. So to me, I think that the fact that people are getting care from the VA is a good thing, and I think, and the treatments that we deliver to veterans are evidence-based.
Gotcha. I'm wondering if you get feedback from veterans that you work with, and if that exposes any gaps in where we need to fill the research, or in how it directs what you think of coming next at the center.
We absolutely seek out veterans. We listen to them and try to engage them in both our research and the products we developed, our educational products. We have several different ways of doing that. We, in the executive division of the National Center, we have something we call our veteran engagement team, our VET, a group of veterans who come together to advise us. If, let's say, a researcher is designing a new study, they can present the study or aspects of the study and seek the veterans' input. In addition, because we develop apps and other telehealth kinds of tools, we often use specific veteran groups for a particular app. So let's say we're designing a new app to treat sleep and PTSD. We would reach out to a unique group of veterans for helping us look at the design of that app, the functionality of that app, iterating through the design process.
That's very cool. Can you share an example of how VA-supported therapy or treatment innovation has changed the outcomes of a veteran with PTSD? Is there any instance that stuck out to you, or just, trends or anything notable that you've noticed?
So let me try to answer that by pointing your listeners to a website that we have. which is called About Face. And the stories of about 80 different veterans. And the idea for the title is you can turn your life around with treatment. And so if you go there, you can find the stories of veterans who served in World War II, veterans who served in Iraq, veterans who might have had a traumatic experience even if they didn't serve in combat. But in every case, a person had PTSD, they were struggling, and they finally realized they needed treatment. This is a place where individuals can find someone perhaps that they relate to. So I'm thinking of one person on the site who, as a result of her treatment, is now becoming a baker. She had been married to a fellow soldier. He was assaulting her while they were married.
I married another soldier who physically and sexually assaulted me for 2 years. It was humiliating, devastating, it was vile, degrading. It was the worst time of my life. I would just drink.
She developed PTSD. She ultimately divorced him, left the military, and she really spiraled in terms of developing addiction, and what was really significantly impaired for a number of years by her addiction and then trying to manage that.
Ultimately, I ended up living under a bridge. I had a cardboard box that I had flattened out and some bags of clothes, and it was my life. My alcoholism progressed to full-fledged drug addiction. I was resolved that I had a moral deficiency and this was my lot in life.
When she finally got treatment, she did turn her life around, and now she's always been interested in baking, apparently, and now she's working on opening a bakery. And so going from a place of a person who I'm forgetting now, but I believe she was even homeless at one point during this journey with the addiction, to being a person who is now getting ready to be a small businesswoman is a great example of treatment doesn't just help you with symptoms. It really helps you get back to living your best life. That's the ultimate goal of treatment.
My willingness to try something different is what catapulted me to the person that I am today. And I don't think I'm marvelous. I don't think I'm there yet. But when I open the cake restaurant, I'll be the best me that I can be. That's my dream.
Stories like this one, Yvonne Grissette's, show the many different experiences of veterans who've grappled with and sought treatment for PTSD. While research advancements and improved care have helped more veterans over the years, I couldn't help but ask Dr. Schnurr, what barriers remain for connecting veterans to therapy? Is it the remaining stigma, awareness, access?
So in terms of barriers, you can think of them perhaps as both the beliefs that people have as well as logistic issues. And so you mentioned stigma. Yes, some people are ashamed. They think PTSD or having a mental disorder is a sign of weakness. They're worried what people will think of them or how it might affect their job. And also believing that treatment doesn't work. Some people think, oh, you can't treat PTSD. Those treatments don't work. You're not going to want to seek treatment if you don't believe the treatments will be effective for you, or if you're concerned about side effects, especially around medication. So some of the strategy that we and others use is just trying to get good information into the hands of people who need it. So giving the message PTSD is not a sign of weakness, that we have effective treatments, that treatments are safe, that you have choice. Also adding the logistic issues to this. For example, let's say it's hard for you to go during business hours to get care. But what if we can make care online available 24/7? Let's say that we have tools that will let you do self-help. The logistic issues are not always talked about as part of the barriers because everyone focuses on stigma, but they're equally important. Finding childcare. Another example, especially for single parents, finding childcare in order to get to treatment can be an issue. And so in some cases, the solutions have to be something like helping people get childcare. That's not what we do, but that's an example of one thing that would be needed. But telehealth does provide a way to both address perhaps people's concerns about privacy or stigma, as well as making it incredibly convenient. So that is one useful strategy. However, we use education because we believe that people who are well informed can make the best choices. And I mentioned to you the About Face website. That's a great example of something we do to try to communicate to veterans or anyone who sees it that no matter how bad things are, if you get treated, if you get the treatment that's right for you, you actually can have a much better life.
Absolutely. For listeners, we'll make sure that we link to your website in the show notes if they want to check it out. I'm sure there are so many wonderful stories and can't wait to check it out myself. So just looking forward, what are you most excited about when you think about the future of PTSD treatment and research for veterans?
So I've already mentioned enhancing treatment outcome. Personally, that's what I'm most excited about. I think we can do it. And so I'm excited by the interest that we have in things like precision medicine, which is essentially the idea that you optimize the treatment for the individual based on perhaps their biology, their psychology, their social environment. All of those factors can help to identify a treatment for a given individual that will work best. Now, we usually think of this in respect to cancer treatment, for example, but there's a lot of interest in mental health, in trying to use that same approach that has shown to be effective in cancer in finding the treatments for different mental disorders. We are not there yet, but I'm excited about it because I think that we can get there. I don't think it's going to be strictly biological, though. I don't think we're going to identify genetic tests or biological strategies that really optimize individual treatment, because a person's psychological makeup, as well as their environment. For example, if you're a single parent with 3 kids, having a treatment that requires nightly homework might be hard for you. And so we might not want to prescribe that treatment for you. We might want to find something that would be more effective, again, with those logistic issues. So I do think we see people now who we treat who recover. Scientists are very reluctant to use the word cure, so I'm not using that word now, but I'm using the word recover. People do recover when they are treated. So we've shown it's possible to recover. It doesn't mean you forget your trauma or your PTSD, but you live as a person who had PTSD going forward. I think I really do believe that we can get many more people to recover.
Absolutely. Just thinking over your career at the center, like I said, you've pretty much seen it since its inception. You've been a key leader there. Over the arc of your time there, what has stood out to you most in terms of, the impact that the center has, its unique role in helping veterans? What progress? Is there any milestones you've seen? I'm curious to dig into your mind since you have such a deep institutional knowledge of the center.
Well, I want to talk about more than the center, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Because I started studying PTSD 40 years ago. So the diagnosis had been introduced in 1980, 1985. That's when I started working. And at the time, a lot of people questioned whether it was a legitimate diagnosis. At the time, some people thought it was just a label put on a failure of a person to cope. So there really was a reason to feel stigmatized if you had PTSD, because many people question, is this real, or is this just you not being able to cope with what other people cope with? So there's a real misunderstanding about what PTSD is. We now know, even though it doesn't happen to everyone, it can happen to anyone. And so that has been a dramatic shift. The 9/11 certainly increased public interest and scientific interest in PTSD, I think furthering the understanding, but also the research in this area. And so we have come a long way from thinking this might be a sign of weakness for people. It's not even a valid diagnosis, to understanding this is not just a veteran problem. It's not just a U.S. problem. It's a human problem. So that's one thing that I've seen. But the other thing is that we learned a lot about how to treat it. So when I came into the field, the idea was more about helping people cope with their symptoms. The message I think we were sending, and it was valid because we didn't know enough about how to really, I use the word recovery. We didn't know how to help people recover. And so at that time, the focus was on helping people cope. That's not my focus. That's not the National Center's focus. That is not where we're at now. We're trying to help people recover, to get toward that cure. And so the fact that we took this disorder that we thought was chronic, it looked chronic because we didn't know how to treat it. And now we know it's treatable. That is the other big thing that we've seen in the field. And you can tell I'm excited about this because I do think that even though we have work to do, there's great promise in what we've been doing and what we're doing currently that is going to get us where we need to be.
I love that you just gave us that longitudinal view of this condition because, just seeing that it went from something that we weren't sure how to even diagnose to copable to treatable, it's astounding how much progress that this field has seen. And it's great that you've been, so key and part of it for so long.
Thank you.
That just also made me think of something you were saying, it was almost seen as a weakness. And that brought me back to what you were saying about moral injury, which is something that I know that has been coming up in military and veteran populations. Can you speak to what moral injury is and how it's similar or different from PTSD, or how moral injury plays into PTSD?
Sure. So this is an active area of investigation, and there are differing opinions about how it intersects with PTSD. But moral injury is something that can happen when a person experiences an event that challenges their moral foundations, either because they witness something or they do something that they believe to be deeply wrong, or they feel deeply betrayed by a trusted entity. It's not just an issue for veterans. It can happen to anyone. Imagine an institutional context where, let's say that you are assaulted at work by a coworker. It could even feel like, in the context of the institution, and especially if the institution didn't protect you, you could feel betrayed, and that could be morally injurious. But for many veterans in a war zone, there are many things that people, even if they don't engage in perpetrating morally injurious activities, they witness them. And so they come home often with PTSD, but with these unique thoughts and feelings about either having seen something that no one should ever have to see, or perhaps having done something that seems so wrong to them that they are morally flawed. And so usually what we see is that we can understand moral injury as a traumatic event that leads to PTSD, but at the same time as something with these unique properties. But I do have to say that sometimes people who don't have a classic, we call it criterion A for the type of event that can cause PTSD, they may not have that kind of event, and they may still have a moral injury.
That makes sense. Thank you for breaking that down. We're getting close to the end here. So I just want to speak directly to people who are affected by PTSD, whether they're a veteran, family member, loved one, or someone who's a civilian and perhaps deals with PTSD. What parting message do you want to share with those to help support people who are suffering?
I think the most important thing is for people to understand there's nothing wrong with them, that anyone can get PTSD. So that message is important. But there's also hope. PTSD is treatable. It's not a life sentence. And if you think you have PTSD, or someone who you think may have PTSD, reaching out to get more information and try to get treatment is what I would encourage. Because if you've heard the treatment doesn't work, please reconsider, because treatment does work. And looking at our website is something that I would recommend, ptsd.va.gov, as a source of information for people, for trauma survivors, veteran as well as non-veteran, and for family members to learn more and get help that's needed.
Excellent. Thank you so much again for your insight and dedication to serving our veterans. I feel like I learned a lot today, and I hope our listeners do too.
Thank you. I just appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Dr. Schnurr shared a lot of helpful information today, but if there's anything I'm walking away with, it's that PTSD is treatable. Recovery is possible, and you don't have to face it alone. If you or someone you know is living with PTSD, whether you're a veteran or not, visit ptsd.va.gov for trusted information, treatment options, and self-help tools. And hear real stories of hope and recovery from veterans at the VA's About Face website. Both links are in the show notes. Also, if you're a veteran in crisis or concerned about one, call the Veterans Crisis Line by dialing 988 and pressing 1, or text 838-255. Help is available 24/7. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Empathy Affect. If you felt like you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, make sure to follow and rate the show wherever you get podcasts. Better yet, share the show with a friend. I hope you'll join us next month. Thanks, y'all.
Empathy Effect is a product of Forrest Marsh. You can reach us at forrestmarshmedia@forrestmarsh.com with any feedback, questions, or inquiries. If you want to know more about today's guest, are interested in participating with Forrest Marsh, or becoming part of our community, check out our show notes for more information.